than the elections themselves? Is there equality before the law? Is there access to justice? Is there freedom from corruption? Are there property rights? These things matter as much as actually the event of holding the election. So, yes, welcome the Arab Spring. 2, recognise this as a process. 3, recognise there will be setbacks. You know, in Britain, you take our history and how long it took to go from the idea of not having an absolute monarch to having a full Trojan democracy. It was the work of centuries. I think this is important to recognise. So I think that is the right approach. Syria and the events of August the 21st, I think it was a truly dreadful day for the world, because chemical weapons were used against civilians in a conflict on a really horrifying scale. And look, dreadful things happen in the world every day, and we have to, focus on those that really matter the most. But it seems to me the whole world came together after the First World War and said that chemical weapons use was completely unacceptable. And even in the awful events of the Second World War, there wasn't that sort of routine battlefield use of chemical weapons we saw in the First World War. So I think it really was a horrific act, horrific event, and I think it was right for the world to take a very strong stance. I obviously wasn't successful in my own parliament in taking quite the stance I wanted to. But nonetheless, I would argue that the stance that people like me took, that the Americans took, has led to what's happening now in Syria, where all the signs are they really are removing and destroying their chemical weapons. So I think the chemical weapons agreements and treaties are really worth trying to hold on to as a world, in all our interests. And so I think that's my answer there. Gentlemen here.
So my question is related to the trade of goods between India and Britain. So what we've realized is India and Britain, the trade in goods has increased in absolute numbers, but the share of each country's overall trade has declined significantly. The Economist puts it that India trades with China in a week what it ends up trading with Britain in a month. So what would be your key areas of improvement to bolster trade between India and India?
Very good. Well, obviously, I mean, China and India are geographically closer than Britain and India, but you're right. I think last year, our exports to India went up 25%, which is welcome. I think also the investment flows, that can often be a sign of future trade flow. And the fact that India is investing so much in Britain and Britain is investing so much in India, the capital flows will lead to greater trade flows in the future. But I think there are some actions we need to take collectively. The trade agreement, the EU-India, European Union-India Free Trade Agreement, has been sitting around for a very long time, and we need to make some progress on this. For instance, a very popular and successful product in Britain, Scotch whisky, there are still tariffs of 140, 150%. So I think we need to recognise that it will be in all our interests, but we need to be bold. We need politicians to be bold. We put more on the table. Sometimes people say that you make a problem easier to solve if you make it bigger. And maybe this is a problem we need to make larger by putting more into the package and really then trying to take some risk. So if we get rid of those trade barriers, I think that would help. I also think the other thing we need to recognise is trade between countries like ours, where a lot of our wealth is in human capital. It's more difficult because it's not simply about exporting physical goods. It's about combining universities. It's about working together on healthcare. It's about services like insurance, banking and architecture. These are almost more difficult to liberalise. But if, for instance, we can get far further on mutual recognition of qualifications, then that would, which we made some progress on this week, that I think would make a big difference. So some of our prizes are harder to get, but nonetheless, if we get them, they will be all the more important. And on that note, let me make a point about students, because I know there's always concern about visas and the message the British government sends out. I want to send a very clear message to you today. 2 points. First of all, there is no limit on the number of Indian students that can come to Britain and study in a British university. You have to have an English language qualification, you have to have a place at one of our universities, but there is no limit whatsoever. As many who want to come, can come. Second, when you leave one of those British universities, if you can find graduate employment, a graduate level job, there's no limit on the number who can stay and work. I think that is a very clear offer. Of course, Britain has to have immigration control. Of course, in a relatively small geographical country with a relatively large population, we need to manage those numbers. But I think the offer to students, and I make it very openly to Indian students, I think the offer is very clear and very good. Next question.
A lot of STEP students are coming here to India because Asia is becoming really important and India is a developing country as well. And I believe that Europe is becoming a museum. It's the way it's not competitive anymore, and that's why I come here as well. And my question is, how do you think we can keep Europe on a competitive level? Because if I come here, I see it's going so fast.
Yes.
It was good in the beginning because of.
And you're from France?
I'm from Belgium.
From Belgium, right. I think you are asking for the Europeans in the audience, you're asking absolutely the question. And I passionately believe that Europe can have, and European countries like mine, like yours, we can have a very bright and brilliant future. But we can't go on as we are. We're competing in a global world with countries that are on the rise, like India, not just India and China, but Malaysia and Indonesia and Singapore. And we do need to change the way we do things. We're not going to succeed by trying to have low-wage economies, and we've just got to build on our strengths. The European countries still have some great strengths. We're still very innovative. Britain, I think, produces more patents per head of the population than any country in the world. We've got some of the best universities in the world, which is an enormous potential driver. In Britain and Belgium, we have the time zone in the middle of the world. So you can trade with Asia in the morning, with America in the afternoon. Britain, of course, has the local language, which you don't quite have in Belgium, but you speak very good English, so you'll need it. But look, if we invest in our competitiveness, our innovation, our creativity, I think we have every opportunity to be success stories, because it's not a zero-sum game. You know, India's gain doesn't have to be Britain's loss. This is not, as I'm sure your economic professors will back me up on this, the whole point about global trade, it's not a win-lose situation. If you actually have clear rules, you get rid of tariffs, you get rid of protectionism, it can be a win-win situation. And Europe has played to its strength of innovation, creativity, high-paid, high-value jobs, and play for those strengths, and we can be a success. And the more that we're able to link up and work with developing countries, the better we'll be able to do it. Our problem, though, at the moment, we are too addicted to a high-cost, high-welfare, over-regulated world, and we need to recognise that fact, and we need to be more competitive, and that, I think, is one of the great battles we face. In fighting it, last point, based on something Amartya Sen said, which is the link between political openness and economic openness and success. One of the most important things we have in European countries, and you have here in India, are our democratic institutions. Now, of course, there are examples around the world of countries that are not democracies, but can point to economic success. But I think we should have the confidence, as people who believe in democracy and rights and equality in front of the law and the rule of law and predictability, those things, in the end, are tremendous sources of strength. The best combination you can have in this globalized world is robust, open, and inclusive political institutions that go with robust, open economies. You have those two things. That can lead to the greatest success, even if you don't have the oil and the gas, even if you don't have all the natural resources, you can be a real success story. I like quoting the example of the two Koreas. You know, there you are, you can stand on that border. One way you've got South Korea, which in 1960 was, the same level of wealth as Zambia. It's now like 20 times wealthier than Zambia. You look north, where they've had closed political institutions, a communist system. They are one of the poorest countries in the world in terms of material poverty. So you have choices as a country, and it's not dependent on your mineral wealth. It's not dependent on which part of the globe you're in. It's dependent on the institutions you put in place, the policies that you pursue, the choices that we make. Shakespeare, writing rather a long time ago, put it very simply, he said, our destiny lies not in the stars, but in ourselves. He was absolutely right. Next question. So,
Mr. Prime Minister, moving away from politics and economics, do you have any, as the CEO of the sixth largest economy in the world, do you have any words of advice on the personal or professional front for management students like us?
right, advice on management. Well, that's what you're here to study. You should probably be giving me the advice. I think the lessons I see in, as you put it, being CEO of an economy, but Prime Minister of a country is the importance of team. You know, Prime Ministers do not make all the decisions, they don't run every department. The most important thing you do is pick a team, and a talented team, and a team that you can work with and trust. I think that is absolutely vital. I think the second thing is a clear strategy. You need to have a clear plan. In politics, as in business, it's like sometimes being in a sort of asteroid shower. You've got things flying at you every day. You know, should you go to Sri Lanka? What are you going to do about the famine in the Philippines? Why has this minister done that? Why is that politician? All these things are coming at you. You need to have a plan for your core role of how you make your country succeed, how you turn your economy around, how you get things right. You need a plan that you then carefully implement. I think those are the two most important things that I have learned, but I'm sure studying here you will be able to look at very good academic examples of leadership that has worked and leadership that has failed, and I'm sure there are more scientific ways of looking at it than those two examples I would give you. And I thank you again for a wonderful welcome. It's been a real pleasure coming in.